My hope is that these passages will challenge us about who we are and how we live. Because we've got to know that. And the first message that I want to share with you is live well. All of us desire to live well, right? But what does that mean? And today I want to share a passage with you from the Gospel of John. And I love the Gospel of John because the Gospel of John is like an onion, right? It's like an onion. There are layers and layers. There's the story of Jesus. But then there will be an underlining meaning that Jesus wants to convey to all of us. But then even under that, the Gospel of John itself may have something else for us to think about. So the Gospel of John, every time I read it, I'll read it and I'll say, oh, got that one. So I'll come back to it and there'll be something else there. Right? So I love the Gospel of John. And I hope you guys enjoy this passage too. And there's so much to think about. And hopefully I can just touch on something that you guys can begin to think about. And today, it's from the Gospel of John chapter 6, starting with verse 51. And I like this passage a lot because up until now, Jesus has been healing people and he's been feeding people. And he's been feeding thousands, right? And the word's gotten out. Hey, Jesus is feeding people. Even if you don't believe, you got to go eat. Right? So people are coming. And Jesus sees all these people coming. Some of them with good intentions, some of them just want to eat. But they're coming. And Jesus looks to them and he begins to talk to them about what it means to get this bread. And it goes like this. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. The Jews then disputed amongst themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? So Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them. Just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so whoever eats me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate, and they died. But the one who eats this bread will live forever. Now, I like that passage. And when you first read that passage, it sounds a little crazy. I don't know about you guys, when I read it, it sounds a little crazy. I am the bread of life that came down from heaven. Yeah, who is this guy? And he goes on and he says, those who eat my flesh and drink my blood. Ooh. Come on, when I read that, did that rub anybody the wrong way? Did that make anybody gross out a little bit? If not, you know what? We've been in the church too long. Right? Right? Eat flesh. Eat, drink blood. Ew. And on the surface, it sounds like cannibalism. And the Jewish people, God's people, knew about cannibalism. And they're saying, what? This Jesus, what's he talking about? Is he talking about really eating flesh and drinking blood? Right? But what Jesus is doing when he talks about the bread that came down from heaven is reminding the listeners and all of us about God's people when they came out of Egypt and ate the bread that literally fell down from heaven. Do you guys remember the story about God's people? They were slaves in Egypt. And they were crying. They were going, oh, God save us, God save us. So God sends them Moses. Moses leads God's people out of slavery, out of Egypt, and they're in the wilderness. They're free. But what do the people do? We're so hungry. We're so hungry. It was so good in Egypt. We want to go back to Egypt. Oh my gosh. Right? God's people. Whiners. It is a character of God's people. Even to today. Right? Whine. We love to whine. And Moses goes to God and says, God, I'm praying to you. These guys are just, we bring them out of slavery, we set them free, and all they do is whine. God, give them something to eat, just so that they'll stop whining. And what happens? Bread comes down from heaven. And people are like shocked, and they start eating, and it tastes so good. It tastes so good, they're like, man, let's gather some more, just in case it doesn't happen again tomorrow. So what do? They put it into baskets, right? And they go, oh, let's save it. But when evening comes, you guys remember what happened? They look into the baskets, and it's like rotted, it's got bugs in it, and it's not edible. And they're like, oh my gosh, and they have to throw it all out. But next morning comes. But then again, there it is, bread from heaven, and they eat. What they have to learn in the wilderness is that each day they have to accept and eat what God gave them, and they live. Each day to turn to God. I believe that we all have a spiritual hunger for God in our life. Whether it is in the church, and maybe so even more outside of the church. People in general have a hunger for God in their life. I believe that. Whether it's a feeling of emptiness that we get sometimes, whether it's a feeling that there's something greater or more in our life, we have a hunger for God. Just talk to people in the world, and they will start sharing with you a sense of emptiness or some sense of greater purpose or a need for it in their life. And this is a truth that I really believe. The hunger for God can only be filled through Jesus. I really believe that. And Jesus said in the Gospel of John chapter 14, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will know my Father also. Jesus, I have come from God for you. If you want to know God, if you want some God in your life, you've got to get to know me. But in our culture, that hunger for God, I believe, is not easily identifiable. All of us in here, I bet you've got a hunger for God. But sometimes you go, I don't know. I'm not really feeling that hungry for God right now. Right? We think that way. But it's not because the hunger is not there. It's there. But I think it's because our lives are filled with so much spiritual junk food. Think about that for a moment. Let's think about real junk food. You know junk food. I know junk food. I love junk food. That's my food pyramid. My wife and daughters were on family vacation for the last 2 weeks without me. Yeah. So, I was eating alone, right? All food groups, right? That's all I'm saying, Dad. You got all the food groups there. I gotta tell you, living by myself, I didn't cook at home. Yeah. Usually in 1 week, our garbage can outside is full, right? I can't pack enough garbage in there. Because, we're cooking, we're doing stuff, we get a lot of garbage. I was home by myself for 2 weeks. I didn't get one kitchen bag of garbage. I was like, oh my God! You know why? I love junk food. I love Twinkies. I grew up on Twinkies. I was so sad to hear that they might discontinue Twinkies. Yes. I love Doritos. It's got cheese. I love Cheetos. I love Doritos. I love instant ramen. Right? I love chocolate. Who doesn't love chocolate? I love all of those. Sad to say, I was reading the label, the nutritional label of one of those instant ramen things. And to my surprise, when I read the nutritional label, what do you think? There was no nutritional value. Oh, it's just a filler! Right? There was none. I was actually shocked, but it tastes so good. All of that. Anybody sympathize with me? That that tastes so good. I love Doritos. I love eating Doritos. After you eat the Doritos, I love to lick my finger. And even that tastes so good. Right? Everything about it. It tastes so good. A lot of what we do to fill the place of God in our lives has no spiritual value. None. However, in most cases, it tastes good. It tastes so good. And I want to invite you guys to start thinking about what is that junk food in your life that tastes so good right now that's taking the place of God. You hunger for God, yet we fill it with something else. And I really believe that's why when Paul writes to the church in Ephesus, there was a lot of junk going on in their life. And he tells them this. He says, be careful then how you live. Not as unwise people, but as wise. Making the most of the time because the days are evil. I almost feel like putting, because the days are Twinkies. Do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is in your life. Do we remember what God's will for our life is? Right? And we've got to discover that and know that if we are going to live well. If we're going to have a sense of fullness and get rid of that emptiness in our life, get rid of those questions and gain a sense of purpose in our life. We all have a spiritual hunger for God. The challenge is for us to fill it with Jesus and not a whole lot of junk. But I love junk too in my life. I don't just love junk food, I love junk. I don't know why, but it's so good. I love junk. What's the junk in your life? Sometimes it takes me a while to realize what that junk is. One of the things that really helps me is when I visit, when I go on a mission trip or go visit what's happening in third worlds. And when you go to those places, you can get a sense of what real hunger is. You can get a sense of what it means for people to be hungry for God. There's a picture up there. These are two girls that our family have been supporting in Vietnam, in Choy. And we've been supporting them for many years now. And we recently got a letter from the older girl, the taller girl, who is the same age as Ellen, same grade as Ellen. And she let us know. She said, I just want to thank you so much for supporting us. I am now in college, and I am studying business. I thought, oh, we should have Jean's a business person, and she's in the business school, my wife. And my daughter, Ellen, is now studying business. So I felt warm and fuzzy inside. Oh, there's my Vietnamese daughter. She's studying business too. And there's a younger girl who's the same age as Audrey, our younger daughter, and she's going to be a senior in high school. And when I went to meet these girls, I found out that these girls are girls that if somebody didn't step up and support them and their families, because their families had multiple children, that these kids would have been turned to prostitution to make money for the family. So we said, okay, we're going to support two girls just like our girls. You know, we started supporting them and their families so that they could go to school and the families could get money and not turn them to prostitution. And what I found out about these two girls is that they are actually ethnic minorities in Vietnam. They're Vietnamese, but they're ethnic minorities. They are a group of people that when the Vietnam War was going on, that their people decided to side with the United States and help them in the war. And because they helped the United States in the war, when the United States left, what do you think happened to these people? The Vietnamese government did not like that. Right? So these people had to flee to the mountains to survive. And they still live in the mountains of Hue, in the central area of Vietnam. And in those mountains, they're not getting educated.